Hey, this is C&D channel. I'm Chris. This is MMA for you. I'm going to be doing my UFC 177 post-fight analysis. Overall, the main card actually wasn't too bad from an action standpoint. As far as a relevancy standpoint goes, the only fight that's truly had some relevance probably Betch Correia versus Shayna Baszler as she gets closer to request to fight Ronda Rousey. Otherwise, there isn't truly any upward movement for a lot of these fighters. You know, they got wins, but it doesn't really mean. I guess Tony Ferguson's in the top 15 now, but otherwise, fighters got wins. You know what I mean? This card was cursed from the start. It even went so far. Henry Cejudo's out. Renan Barão's out. The original main event had to be moved. Apparently the production truck caught on fire. But yeah, it was so destroyed. When you watch the video packages, so many of these fighters don't have that great of a highlight. They had to show Carlos Diego Ferreira. Whatever, 3 moves he used on Colton Smith was, his video package, Joe Soto had nothing. They had to just show him. They had to show him in the weigh-in. That's the only footage they had of him. So it's kind of sad in that sense. I'll probably get into stuff because Dana White has some stuff to say towards the media in regards to this event. So I'll probably talk about that probably afterwards because I do want to get to the fights. As far as my picks go, not terrible. Out of 8, there's only 8 fights. I got 5 right, so it's not the worst, not the best, or anything like that. Not too terrible. I think in hindsight, though, I should have picked Anthony Hamilton over Juan Potts. That was just that was one I definitely should have been a little more thinking about. Bonuses: Ferreira and Nejam got fight of the night, and Dillashaw and Medeiros got performance of the night honors. Okay, let's get started. TJ Dillashaw defeated Joe Soto by knockout head kick with follow-up ground and pound in the 5th round. Soto obviously performed much better than many have thought. And he actually performed a lot better than Renan Barão did against TJ Dillashaw. A couple things can be attributed to that. One was his use of good head movement and overall defense. One thing I actually said in the prediction videos when I picked Anthony Burchak to beat Soto. One reason why was that he tends to shell up a lot. However, I didn't take into consideration he has really good head movement, all things considered. And the counter-punching from Soto worked relatively well for Dillashaw. Just stylistically, it just seemed to... Dillashaw was hitting some high output striking on Soto. Going so far as throwing 4 or 5 jabs at times, head kicks, a couple body punches, some uppercuts, but stylistically, Soto wasn't, was pretty good. He's definitely a lot less flat-footed than Barão. He's just more of a boxer than anything else, and so. Dillashaw was getting behind Barão at times. He didn't necessarily see that against Soto. He also threatened with the counter over and right a lot of times. to me, Dillashaw really think twice about certain, offensive maneuvers. So he just performed a lot better than many thought. And then when Soto got taken down, he can scramble back to his feet and scramble out of bad positions and whatnot. This is the second 5th round finish from TJ Dillashaw. Guy's a finisher. What can you say? He's a guy that could cruise, but he's not going to. He's just that type of fighter. Good for him, I didn't realize it until I was actually talking to some people. I'd like to see Dillashaw build up his brand a lot more. I mean, he beat Renan Barão. But the funny thing is, if you actually look at his resume, he actually doesn't have an extensive list of top flight wins. And beating Joe Soto actually doesn't help that, unfortunately. I mean, it was a hard-fought performance, but I'd really like to see Dillashaw, and moving forward, that's just what's going to happen. Really build up his resume. Apparently, his resume is lost to Dodson, and he goes on a winning streak, beating Walal Watson, Issei Tamura, Hugo Viana. I mean, there aren't these many great wins in there, to be honest with you. Then he loses to Sunshine in a fight that a lot of people thought he won, including me. Then he goes and beats Mike Eason, who's on a 2-fight losing streak. Then he beats Barão, and that's his first win of someone within the top 10 that has true top 10 skill. And then he beats Soto. So, moving forward, Dillashaw should get the winner of Sunshine versus Caraway, or the winner of Cruz versus Mizugaki. Dillashaw Cruz in particular would be a pretty cool fight. I'd really like to see that fight happen. But a rematch with the Sunshine wouldn't be too bad either. I think that'd be a pretty competitive fight as well. With Soto, admirable performance. It makes me wonder if they're going to give him a top 10, top 15 guy. An up-and-comer, maybe. I mean, they can give him a Sergio Pettis or an Alex Caceres or something like that. Or they can give him his original opponent, Anthony Burchak. I don't... It's tough to say. Where do they want to take Joe Soto? Did this really good performance against TJ Dillashaw's show that he should already be fighting top competition or not? I guess it's up to the matchmaker. If it's up to me, let's give him that first UFC win and see where he goes. I'd just say more lower to mid-tier guys of the division, really. Next fight after that, Tony Ferguson defeated Danny Castillo by split decision. I agree with this decision. It's not just because I picked Tony Ferguson to win. I was talking about it with someone I was watching it with, and he agreed. It's just Danny Castillo. I mean, I give it mainly for the first 2 rounds. I felt Ferguson was beating Castillo up in the feet. And yeah, he went for that Darce that didn't really, or Marsh, I believe is what they call. That honestly, that unfortunately led to Castillo staying on top. Second round, I felt that Ferguson was doing more damage in the first half of the round. I think, and Castillo, once he was able to get on top of Ferguson, just didn't do anything with it. And a lot of people will use, I can understand the sense of top control if top control was stayed on the back and mount north-south or side mount. I can kind of understand that. When top control is just kept, Danny Castillo would get, side mount on Ferguson. Ferguson would just recover to half guard or full guard and do more damage from the bottom, threaten with more from the bottom, and Castillo did pretty much nothing with it. So I got to give the first 2 rounds to Tony Ferguson. Yeah, arguably even the third in a sense, but I think Castillo was actually hitting a couple. Was definitely landing clean on Ferguson on the third, and while he didn't do much on top, he just stayed there for a very much extended period of time in that round. Even got mount and threatened with an arm triangle at the very end. So I can understand Castillo getting the third round. I think, and we're starting to see it a little more, that guys that are just like laying praying, and make no mistake, Castillo is just laying praying here, are definitely going to be on a very precarious position with the judges. I mean, it's not, and that's a good thing. It's not a guaranteed thing that a guy on top that's just winning on quote-unquote control, especially if it's on like full guard or something, is like a guarantee win. That's a great thing, actually. We're seeing it a little more. Sarah McMahon only got a split decision on Lauren Murphy, essentially because of that. And it wasn't unanimous. You would think it'd be unanimous, but it wasn't. Milana Dudova versus Elizabeth Phillips, same deal. Just being on top isn't enough. Alexis Dufresne versus Sarah Morris, same thing. You can't just stay on top and hold a guy down. Even though Danny Castillo said in his post-fight interview, he held a grown man down throughout the whole fight. I mean, we know a lot more practicing jiu-jitsu, doing mixed martial arts, that being on the bottom isn't advantageous, but you are still able to produce offense. Sometimes significant. Elbows from the bottom work pretty well, punches from the bottom, not the greatest thing, because gravity kind of works against the guy. But if you're also throwing submission attempts and whatnot, like Ferguson was, it's control, I suppose, but that's it. There's not much in terms of, there's nothing effective about it. You're changing the position of the fight, but you're not really doing much offensively, if you're just holding a guy down. No damage is being taken on Ferguson or anything like that. And since we know more about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we know that a guy on the bottom, especially in guard and like full guard, can be in more or less just an advantageous position. The other thing is too, a lot of guys, I think someone was talking about the idea of truly neutralizing your opponent. I think it was like Jordan Brain at the SRN. I don't really feel that Castillo did much. It's one thing to control a fighter. It's one thing to truly neutralize them. I didn't really get the feeling that Castillo was neutralizing Ferguson. He was able to throw a lot of offense and get out of dominant positions relatively easily. So he wasn't really neutralizing his offense. Sometimes you can see a guy where it's just the bottom guy just can't even do anything because the guy on top is truly good at neutralizing. I think Castillo was just staying on top, really. I mean, I guess you can give the argument, since he wasn't submitted or anything, that he was neutralizing, but he didn't prevent, that's another word, Ferguson from being able to throw offense. That's the other, and I think that's kind of important, So yeah, I'm actually pretty happy about this decision. I think Ferguson stepped up in competition, probably the winner of Masvidal versus Krause. I think he's in that level now. He's with Masvidal. Miles Jury's kind of there too. You can actually give him the winner of Jury versus Gomi. I think he's in that class that's like of up-and-comers, you know, at lightweight. That's more or less like a future top 10 guy. He beat a good test in Danny Castillo here. I think Castillo should get the loser of Jury versus Gomi, or maybe the loser of Norman Park versus Diego Sanchez. Next round, that Betts Correia defeated Shayna Baszler by TKO in the second round. You know, the first round, Baszler was unable to really get her clinch takedown. She's too old school. What can you say? She's way too one-dimensional. She's not athletic enough. Really, I mean, she doesn't have to stand up, and it showed here. She showed a good chin, but you know, overall, Baszler got beaten on the feet pretty good by Correia, and you know, she showed a good chin. She wouldn't necessarily get knocked down, but man, was she in that second round? Was she just taking punches over and over again? Elbows too. Punches to the body. Good stuff from Correia. Baszler, though, she's probably get wins in the UFC, but, you know, the fact of the matter is, a lot of these new female fighters coming in, a lot more athletic now, you know, a lot more well-rounded. Baszler, you know, I mean, she can scratch off from her bucket list that she fought in the UFC. At this point, you know, she's just a good veteran name for a young fighter to get on her resume. I mean, at this point, she's tough. Her gas tank ain't that great, though. I'm sorry to say, this isn't the first time that she's pretty much just gassed down in the second round. You watch the Juliana Pena fight and just see, like, hey, she had a decent first round. And in the second round, she just, I don't know, she just, like ran out of gas, pretty much. And I can see the, argument. I mean, if you want to give Correia for a title shot, it wouldn't be the worst thing to do. I think, the winner of Nunes versus Zingano are going to be ahead of Correia at this point, so to get a title shot, so I'd probably give it to one of them. But you can give Correia. There's a lot of good fights for her. She can get the winner of Rin Nakai versus Miesha Tate, Alexis Davis, Sarah Kaufman, Leslie Smith. So there's a lot of good fights for Correia. If you want, with Baszler, if you want to give her someone like a Jessica Eye or Kel Pennington, the loser of Jessica Andrade versus Larissa Pacheco, you can go there. I mean, there's still good fights for Baszler. But yeah, you know, she's, like I said, just way too one-dimensional at this point. And against all these up-and-comers, the Juliana Penas, the Betts Correias, just not gonna work. Especially a lot of these new up-and-comers are a lot more athletic than fighters from Baszler's generation. Next fight after that, Carlos Diego Ferreira. I'll say Ferreira. Defeated Ramsey Najem by TKO in the second round. You know, I said in the prediction video, and I'll say it here, the guy's defense is terrible. I mean, it's cool that Ramsey Najem wants to have fun fights. He throws a lot of offense, you know. Lots of punches. He has some good wrestling. He's a very offensive-minded fighter. You know, I guess you can almost say he's like a Lieben type or a Vanderlei Silva type, because they kind of forsake defense for offense, and it showed here. You know, I liked a lot of some things I saw from Ferreira. He's very active off his back when he's taken down. He has some very oddly tricky stand-up. He's still like a brawler. He kind of wings punches, but they're effective. I don't really get it. I think someone will probably be able to a more technical fighter will probably be able to exploit that out of Ferreira, but Nejem isn't that guy. But you know, it's actually a pretty solid win for him. But yeah, Nejem, man. I mean, I remember when he got knocked out by like Miles Jury. He gets hit clean just so much, you know. He's a guy, as far as picking his fights, he's very unreliable because he actually has a skill to beat a guy like Carlos Diego Ferreira, but he doesn't fight smart in that sense. He can be offensive minded, but he forsakes defense way too much. Just more lower to mid-tier guys of the division for both of these guys. Next fight, that Yancy Medeiros defeated Damon Jackson by reverse gi. It's a reverse bulldog choke in the second round. Cool finish from Medeiros, and man, did Damon Jackson just give that, in a sense, make that tighter for Medeiros there. I mean, the way the direction he spun just gave Medeiros that. But you know, it was a solid win. You know, Medeiros needed that win. Damon Jackson was fighting above his weight class. But man, he can't pull stuff like that on the UFC level. I mean, you can't make mistakes like that, because you know, guys like Yancy Medeiros are going to take advantage of that. I think Medeiros is kind of a dark horse prospect in the division. It's good takedown defense, throws well in combination. You know, he's a tall and lanky guy. He's relatively big for the weight class. I remember watching this guy in Strikeforce fight at middleweight. You know, apparently he's fighting as high as light heavyweight. So, and he's still pretty young too, mid-20s. You know, trains with good guys. Trains with Nate Diaz. So yeah, you know, just more lower to mid-tier guys in the division for Medeiros. For Damon Jackson, featherweight. So where he should go. He's not a bad fighter. I like his wrestling. He's really aggressive about getting takedowns. An aggressive guard passer. Active on top, you know. And an active finisher as well. But yeah, it's a good win for the Yancy Medeiros there. On to the prelims. Derek Brunson defeated Lawrence Larkin by unanimous decision. I said it on my prediction video. If you watched my prediction video, you'd know I was very iffy on picking Lawrence Larkin here. I shouldn't have done it. I was even saying it's like, Derek Brunson, you know. It's well-rounded, you know. Like, he's been showing to be a bit more consistent these days. And, yeah, that's the thing with Brunson, you know. Not the most aesthetically pleasing win. It's close to laying prey. I think he was actually throwing some ground and pound on top, though. Especially from half guard. I remember him throwing elbows and stuff. I don't think it was total lay and pray in this case. It's more like stay busy ground and pound, which honestly I like better than lay and pray, to be honest with you. Larkin, man, he has good takedown defense, you know. He showed it here, but he does have fundamental mistakes in his grappling. I mean, you saw at the end of, I think it's some part of the round when Brunson was in half guard, and Larkin's giving him multiple arm triangle opportunities. One thing that Brunson was doing wrong that Larkin just couldn't do anything against, and if you do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, even as a white belt, your instructor will tell you, don't put your hands and especially your arms on the mat, you know, and full guard on top. Brunson was doing that a lot against Lawrence Larkin, but Larkin couldn't do anything about it, you know. Makes me wish too. I notice that a lot actually in MMA. Just there's a lot of fighters that will put their hands on the mat, and there aren't a lot of good guard players in mixed martial arts. There's a couple, obviously, but there's not enough that will take advantage of those mistakes, you know. But yeah, you know, I heard that Larkin's cutting down to 170 after this fight. I'm actually really surprised by that. I never thought of Larkin as a small middleweight. He fought as high as light heavyweight. Didn't even seem that small there, you know. Seemed relatively small, but, you know, seemed like a good sized middleweight. He didn't seem that much smaller than Brunson. Here's the thing, weight cutting isn't a cure-all. I mean, it might help his takedown defense because he's bigger. But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't help the fundamentals. And that's the problem, you know? He's not going to be a better Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner and a better overall grappler because he cuts 15 more pounds. It just doesn't work that way. You know, we've seen it a couple times, you know. The other thing is, too, he gets some really there's some interesting matchmaking with Larkin. For some reason, he gets a lot of grappling-minded fighters. For some reason, Derek Brunson, Francis Carmon, you know. I mean, Brad Tavares is not, but, you know, I think at this point, you got to use Lorenz Larkin as, if they even keep the guy, because the guy's on a 3-fight losing streak now, as a fun action fighter. That's what they should use him for. But yeah, you know, good win for Brunson, I guess. I mean, it wasn't the most aesthetically pleasing, but it's a win he can definitely use. Brunson, I'll say, will be Brunson, I suppose. You know, if he can get his takedowns going, he can probably win fights. Stand-up isn't too bad. His cardio is a bit suspect, to be honest with you. Chin, a bit suspect as well. But yeah, you know, if he can get his game going, he can get wins over mid-level guys. I don't know against top-shelf competition, but mid-level guys, yeah, he can beat those guys. Larkin, if he's not cut, hopefully you get some action fighters, and if it goes to 170, you know, I hope he just gets action fighters at 170. Next fight after that, Anthony Hamilton defeated Juan Potts by TKO in the second round. Man, I should have picked Anthony Hamilton to win this fight. I figured that he'd be favored to win. I know Juan Potts is a pretty bad heavyweight. I didn't know he was this bad. I saw, like, Anthony Hamilton's fights against, like, Alexei Olenek. I wasn't impressed. He lost by neck crank. And then he lost, you know, he beat Smelino Rama. I didn't think he looked that great against him. But in hindsight, I should have known that Potts probably, I know he had some judo background. I thought he'd be able to use that to defend takedowns better. No, Anthony Hamilton was able to take him down pretty much at will. Probably cut Juan Potts. This performance was just terrible. I mean, it's a terrible fight, and the ref stopping the fight was the best thing that can happen. It's also very unusual the way Hamilton won. Juan Potts isn't half guard. He's not necessarily trapped or anything like that, and he just keeps getting punched. Not even on his liver side, you know, and like the ribs and that area on the body, you know. It was really red, you know. It's a really strange finish, actually. I'm just glad it was finished, you know. Didn't go much farther because the fight was pretty terrible, to be honest with you. It's very much low-level heavyweights here. Like you said, Potts Probably going to get cut. That was an abysmal performance there. Even though he's a heavyweight, I mean, just looks so bad. Anthony Hamilton, just more lower tier guys of the division for him. And finally, Chris Wade defeated Kane Carrizozo by guillotine choke in the first round. What can I say? That was a nice. Wade did a nice judo type throw on Carrizozo, and then he got the arm and guillotine from top mounted. You know, good win for Chris Wade. He's actually not seen a couple of his fights. He's not the most potent finisher, but in here he was very aggressive about getting the finish, and I like that from him. He's a good wrestler, an overall good grappler. You know, wouldn't necessarily say he's a blue chip prospect or anything like that, but good enough prospect, good enough to get wins in the UFC, for sure. Yeah, good way to start his UFC career, to be honest with you. Both these guys should just get lower to mid-tier guys in the division. So, I was gonna mention that I know Dana White definitely had a particular attitude towards the MMA media in regards to his fight card. He pretty much said that what they had to say was despicable. You know, he definitely had an "I don't care, go watch a movie if you don't like this fight card." He has that attitude towards fight cards, like, oh, you can't please everyone, you know, if you don't like it, don't buy it. And, you know, that type of marketing obviously doesn't work. You know, I mean, and companies wouldn't do that, but I think there's a bit more of an implicit issue with that. There definitely is something of a lack of recognition of what's going on in the UFC right now. And, you know, one thing is that I notice is that a lot of MMA fans that aren't like Zuffa shills or like Zuffa employees will make excuses for it. And that actually confuses me, because you watch a card like this. I did pay for the card, but I had friends that helped me pay for it. You know, I actually had a lot of guests over. I wasn't going to buy it, but I was actually going to go somewhere. But circumstances made it where I was going to stay home with my friends, with a lot of other guests in my house. So it was actually appropriate. And I didn't have to pay full price for this card. But, you know, if it's don't like it, don't buy it. That, you know, obviously we don't like it because the card sucks. You know, I mean, as far as relevancy goes, and as far as paying $50 goes, you know, that's the thing. If we're gonna pay $50, we generally want to see higher ranked competition. Higher ranked guys tend to fight better, and you tend to see better fights. You want to see a sense of relevancy, fights that matter, you know, worth our $50. And I think, as a consumer, I don't think that's unreasonable. As a consumer, you know, I know that the excuse for the UFC is, oh, global expansion, putting on more shows, we have to have a bigger roster, and in a sense, they have to get watered down cards because they have so many events. But as a consumer, should I really care about that? Like, and the way I see it is like, I'm a consumer. Why should I make excuses for them? You know what I mean? Why should I care about the excuses? You know, I'm a guy that puts time and effort towards the product. You know, your money comes from guys like me, collectively, obviously. You know, I'm looking for a quality product. That's the thing. If I don't like it, don't buy it. Well, why have that attitude? You know, I don't understand. That doesn't make sense to me. Instead of that attitude, why not, like, oh, hey, maybe we should do something about it. It's not my job for the UFC and Zuffa to do something about it. And so, I gotta admit, I didn't take well. I'm not taking very well towards the overall attitude from Zuffa in general about quote-unquote oversaturation and these watered-down cards, you know? The original card wasn't even that great. It was built upon 2 title fights, and the rest of the card were, like, mid-level fights, you know? They want us to pay for that. And then when Demetrius Johnson versus Chris Carriazo, and once again, Demetrius Johnson versus Chris Carriazo, it's like, really? You know? Once again, I know there's excuses for it. He's the best guy available. Yada, yada, yada. Is it my job to make excuses? It's not my job to make excuses for them. You know? And honestly, as harsh as it sounds, it's not my responsibility as a consumer of the product to care or even be sympathetic for the excuses. Injuries happen. I get it. They can't control it. I can be sympathetic towards that. But otherwise, you know, it's not my job to be sympathetic. It's not my job to give excuses for the UFC. It's not my job to care for the excuses that they give. If the cards are watered down, I don't like it. Obviously, others don't like it. Then, you know, it's in my opinion, on them to fix it. I don't need to be fixed. I'm the consumer. You know, it's up to them to fix it somehow. I don't think anything will happen. They have very aggressive global expansion. They have to have more cards because of it, and that's just the way they're doing things. Doesn't seem like they're going to back down. So, I guess all you can do is pay with your wallets, pay with your time. If you don't want to watch something, don't. If something's good though, hey, you know. I love Machida versus Weidman. I thought that was a great event. That was fun. I thought that was worth my $50. I think 178 is actually worth my $50. I want to see Cerrone versus Alvarez. I want to see Tim Kennedy versus Yoel Romero. I want to see Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier. You know? Give me fight cards like that. Please. You know, I'm putting down $50. Give me fight cards like that where even when a great main event like John Jones versus Daniel Cormier has to get postponed to a later date, and you have to fill it with a not so great fight in Demetrius Johnson versus Chris Carriazo. You had such a strong undercard to still make it a great pay-per-view worthy card, worth for a lot of people too. You know, I'm not the only one. For a lot of them, it's worth their $50. You know, there's a lot of fights I want to see there. You know, so you know, I get it. They had injuries and whatnot. I get it. You know. I guess I can sympathize with that, but I can't really sympathize with this, like, I don't care attitude, because it almost places the blame on the consumer, on us, essentially, MMA fans, instead of, and it enables, like, that's the thing. The reason why I mention it is because you're kind of, people that give excuses, the consumers that have nothing to really gain but give excuses for the UFC, you kind of enable the UFC to keep having cards like UFC 177. That's the thing, and that's kind of disappointing. Change will not happen if you don't voice your displeasure. And if you keep giving the UFC a pass, keep repeating the excuses they want you to repeat and they want you to hear, nothing's going to change. That's the thing. And that's why giving this little, you know, speech right now, nothing's going to change, you know, if you keep giving, if people and the UFC themselves keeps giving excuses. So that's it for my post-fight analysis for UFC 177. If you have any comments, just leave them below. That's it for MMA for you. Thank you guys very much.